My father didn't just overlook a forgotten birthday or dismiss a forgotten school ceremony. No, his absence was far more profound. He missed my wedding. The one day in my entire life I had pleaded, heart in my throat, for him to be there. The one day his hollow presence, or rather his lack thereof, resonated through the cathedral walls, drowning out the gentle flutter of the organ music and the sacred vows I whispered to my husband. I remember standing at the end of that impossibly long aisle, my hands clenching the delicate stems of my bridal bouquet until my knuckles were white and trembling. My gaze was fixed, not on Daniel, my groom, but on the solitary, ornate chair at the front row, specifically reserved for him. It remained starkly empty. There was no hurried text message, no last-minute, half-baked excuse offered through an intermediary. Just a profound, crushing silence. The kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room, but infiltrates your very bones and settles there. A silent wound carried for years, echoing in every quiet moment. In the aftermath, still raw from the sting of rejection, I fiercely resolved that I was done. Done needing his approval. Done chasing a love that was perpetually withheld. Done hoping he would ever just once choose me. But then, as if ripped from the pages of a fiction novel, everything changed with blinding speed. It was a crisp autumn morning when the news broke my boutique hotel chain had hit a staggering $580 million valuation. And suddenly, my name, Hannah Collins, was plastered across every business network, flashing in bold letters on their screens. My phone, a constant companion, suddenly lit up with a message I once would have wept tears of joyful desperation to receive. Family dinner at 7 p.m. Important discussion. The irony, a bitter twist in my gut, was palpable. He hadn't shown up for the most important day of my life, my wedding, but I knew, with a certainty that was both chilling and exhilarating, that I would show up for that dinner, and I would bring something he could never have possibly foreseen. People often imagine a broken family as a cacophony of sound, shouting matches, doors slamming, furniture rattling, an endless cycle of chaos. Mine was different. Mine was quiet, unnervingly, uncomfortably quiet. My father, Richard Collins, a man whose presence filled every room he entered, rarely needed to raise his voice. His absence, however, generated a deafening noise all its own. He moved through the expansive, pristine halls of our Seattle house like a dark, gathering storm cloud, always impeccable in a tailored suit, his demeanor cold, his gaze impenetrable. He was a force, and somehow, everything in our world revolved around him, even when he wasn't physically present. My mother, Evelyn, drifted in his wake, a fragile ghost adorned in pearls, her movements soft, her whispers softer. "Honey, your father's under a lot of pressure," she'd murmur, a rehearsed mantra, whenever he missed yet another of my piano recitals. Another award ceremony where I stood, clutching my certificate, scanning the crowd for a face that never appeared. Be understanding, understanding. That single, innocuous word became the convenient bandage for every fresh wound, a flimsy excuse for a lifetime of neglect. My older brother, Ethan, was sunshine by comparison. He was Dad's golden boy, the star quarterback, the heir apparent with his perfectly straight teeth and impeccable handshake. He was the son my father proudly presented to his powerful business partners, a dazzling trophy. Meanwhile, I lingered in the background, a silent observer with my overflowing notebooks and quiet, unspoken dreams, a shadow in my own home. I was barely 12, all awkward angles and budding hope, when I finally mustered the courage to confront him. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind where the Pacific Northwest rain lashed against the windows, and my father was, as always, hunched over his laptop in his dimly lit study, the screen casting an ethereal glow on his impassive face. "Dad," I'd begun, my voice barely a squeak. "Why don't you ever come to my events?" He didn't even bother to look up. His eyes remained fixed on the glowing screen, his fingers still clicking rhythmically on the keyboard. "Because, Hannah," he replied, his voice flat, devoid of warmth or curiosity. "I'm building a future for this family. You should be grateful." Grateful. Grateful for what? For being invisible? It was then, in that cold, rain-swept room, that I understood a bitter truth. Love in our house wasn't a given. It was a commodity, contingent on a set of unspoken, unattainable conditions. And I, it seemed, was inherently incapable of meeting them. So, like many forgotten daughters before me, I retreated. I constructed an intricate, vibrant world within the confines of my own mind. A world where I was seen, cherished, and where I could, someday, earn a place in his line of sight. Little did I know that to finally truly be seen, I would have to shed every skin, every expectation, and become someone entirely different, someone he would never recognize. Your wedding day is the happiest day of your life. People often chirp, a cliché whispered by well-meaning friends. Mine certainly began that way, bathed in a fragile glow of hope, until, inevitably, it wasn't. I remember the oppressive silence of the bridal suite, the scent of expensive perfume and fresh flowers hanging heavy in the air. My veil was perfectly pinned, my lipstick meticulously applied, a mask of serene composure. But my hands, they betrayed me, trembling just enough to reveal the raw nerves I desperately tried to conceal. Every few minutes, my gaze would drift to my phone, lying on the antique dresser like a silent oracle. I wasn't waiting for witty texts from friends, or last-minute updates from the caterers. I was waiting for one specific message. One simple, life-affirming line from my father. Asterisk, I'm on my way. Asterisk, it never came. 10 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, my screen finally flickered to life. My heart leaped, a frantic bird trapped in my ribcage, before plummeting when I saw the sender. Asterisk, Dad. Asterisk, the message itself was a punch to the gut. Can't make it. Important meeting. No apology, no explanation, no hint of regret. It was just another transaction, cold and impersonal, as if skipping his only daughter's wedding was akin to postponing a routine conference call. My breath caught, a painful knot in my chest, but I forced a smile for the sake of my bridesmaids, their faces glowing with innocent excitement. I had learned, long ago, how to swallow pain, how to carry it quietly, a hidden burden no one else could see. When the grand doors of the church swung open and the solemn strains of the processional music filled the air, I walked down the aisle alone. I could feel the hushed whispers of the guests, their eyes tracking my solitary journey, probably speculating if it was some profound, symbolic gesture, a modern, empowered statement. It was anything but. When I finally reached the altar, Daniel, my husband-to-be, met me there, his eyes softening with a tenderness that was balm to my wounded soul. "Hannah," he whispered, gently taking my trembling hands in his. "You don't have to pretend you're okay." And that, in its profound simplicity, was the worst part of it all. I had been pretending for so long, weaving such an elaborate tapestry of composure and strength, that I wasn't even sure if I remembered how to stop. Later that evening, after the last echoes of laughter from the reception had faded and the ambient glow of the fairy lights had dimmed, I sat beside Daniel on the hotel balcony, overlooking the shimmering tapestry of the city below. "He could have at least tried," I murmured, the words raw and laced with a weariness I hadn't realized was so profound. Daniel, ever gentle, squeezed my hand. "One day," he promised softly, "he'll regret it." I wasn't so sure. In that quiet moment, gazing at the deserted streets stretching out beneath us, something deep inside me shifted. It wasn't a sudden, cataclysmic break, but rather a slow, silent unraveling, thread by painful thread. I finally understood, with a clarity that chilled me to the bone. If my father couldn't bring himself to show up for my wedding, he would never, ever show up for anything that didn't directly, undeniably benefit him. What I didn't know then was that he would eventually show up, but only when I became worth a staggering $500 million. The wedding, or rather, my father's absence from it, forged something resilient within me. Not bitterness, no. That was too petty, too draining. This was resolve. If his lifelong pattern of neglect taught me anything, it was that waiting for approval, for recognition, for love from someone incapable of giving it, was a slow, insidious form of self-destruction. So I stopped waiting. I stopped hoping. I stopped trying to earn what should have been freely given. Instead, I dove headfirst into the one thing that had always made intrinsic sense to me, hospitality. But not the dusty, outdated motels my father glorified, the kind that reeked of stale ambition. My vision was for modern, intentional spaces, carefully curated havens where people truly felt seen, valued, and genuinely cared for. My first property was, to put it mildly, a disaster. It was a past its prime lodge nestled just outside Portland, a relic of forgotten glory. Mold bloomed under the peeling wallpaper, and the carpets, stained with years of neglect, smelled perpetually of rain-soaked socks and quiet despair. But it was mine, all mine. The bank manager, a portly man with thinning hair and a condescending smile, looked at me as if I'd lost my mind when I signed the papers. "You sure about this, Miss Collins?" he'd asked, his tone dripping with patronizing politeness. A thinly veiled question that really meant, "Asterisk, you're too young, too inexperienced, too female to possibly know what you're doing." Asterisk, I simply met his gaze, my chin held high, and nodded. I'm sure. What I didn't tell him, what I couldn't articulate then, was that failure simply wasn't an option. Not when every fiber of my being screamed to prove I wasn't the fragile, emotional, easily dismissed daughter my father had always perceived me to be. So I worked. I scrubbed floors at midnight, fueled by lukewarm coffee and sheer stubbornness. I drafted marketing plans at dawn, my brain buzzing with nascent ideas. I hired staff only when I could absolutely afford them, which in those lean early days was agonizingly rare. Some nights, exhaustion pulling at my limbs, I'd simply curl up behind the front desk on a thin blanket, the soft hum of the empty lobby a strange lullaby, because going home, to my quiet apartment, felt too much like admitting defeat. During one brutal winter storm, when the power flickered and died across the entire property, plunging everything into freezing darkness, I spent 4 grueling hours in the frigid chill, guiding disoriented guests with a flickering flashlight, profusely apologizing for circumstances entirely beyond my control. I cried once, precisely once, in the cramped, echoing boiler room, silent tears of frustration and exhaustion streaming down my face, before wiping them away with the back of my hand and resolutely getting back to work. By year 3, that decrepit old lodge, once a symbol of my reckless ambition, boasted a waiting list every single weekend. By year 5, I had expanded, acquiring 2 more locations. Intimate, minimalist, eco-focused retreats that travelers raved about online, their glowing reviews echoing across social media and travel blogs. Investors started calling, their voices eager, their offers enticing. Interviewers requested features, profiling me in magazines and podcasts. Competitors, once dismissive, now tried desperately to replicate my innovative model. But from my father, not a single word, not a text, not even a secondhand comment filtered through Ethan. It was as if I was building a magnificent skyscraper in the middle of a vast, empty desert, tall, gleaming, reaching for the heavens, and yet utterly, completely unseen by the one person I had once desperately hoped would finally look. Then came the morning everything, truly everything, changed. The morning my CFO, Lena, burst into my office, breathless, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and elation. "Hannah," she gasped, her voice trembling with barely contained excitement. The valuation came in, my pulse spiked, a sudden jolt through my veins. "Well," I prompted, a nervous tremor in my own voice. She grinned, a brilliant, unrestrained smile. $580 million. I froze, not from shock, not from overwhelming joy. No, the first image that flashed into my mind, sharp and vivid, was that empty chair at my wedding. And for the very first time I didn't feel the familiar, overwhelming urge to cry. Instead, a quiet, potent sensation bloomed within me. I felt powerful. What I didn't know was that miles away my father, Richard Collins, had just read the very same headline. And for the first time in what must have been years, he finally remembered he had a daughter. The morning the valuation hit the headlines, my office buzzed like an agitated beehive. Every phone on every desk rang incessantly, a constant symphony of success. Every email notification pinged, a cascade of congratulations and inquiries. The torrent of messages from partners, investors, journalists, industry titans. It all blurred together in a warm, surreal haze of triumph. But the moment I'll never truly forget was far quieter, far more intimate. I was alone in my office, gazing out at the sprawling city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows, when my personal phone buzzed again. I assumed it would be another reporter, perhaps a long-lost college friend reaching out. It wasn't. The caller ID simply read, *Dad. For a moment, I literally couldn't breathe. He hadn't texted me in almost 3 years. My hand, despite my newfound power, trembled as I unlocked the phone. The message was concise, devoid of any emotional warmth. Family dinner at 7 p.m. Important discussion. There was no congratulations. No, I'm proud of you. Not even my name. It read like a direct order, an impersonal summons to a board meeting, devoid of any genuine familial connection. I stared at the screen for so long that the words began to blur, my eyes burning. Daniel walked in then, holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee, and paused, concern etched on his face, when he saw my expression. What happened? He asked softly. I wordlessly showed him the message. His jaw tightened. He didn't reach out when your company hit $10 million, Daniel observed, his voice calm but firm. Not at $50 million, not even at $200 million, but $580 million. I swallowed hard, the bitter taste of truth on my tongue. He wants something. Then don't go, Daniel said gently, his eyes pleading. But the thing was, I had to go. Not for him, not for some vain hope of reconciliation. I had to go for me. I needed to see what he looked like when he finally realized I no longer needed his approval. When I pulled into the driveway of my home, my CFO, Lena, was already waiting, a folder clutched in her hand, her expression somber. You should see this before tonight, she said, her voice unusually subdued. My stomach dropped, a cold, heavy stone. Inside the folder were pages upon pages of damning financial reports. Loan defaults, contentious contractor disputes, an ominous stack of foreclosure notices, all tied directly to my father's sprawling real estate properties. Your dad's empire is collapsing, Hannah? Lena explained softly, her gaze empathetic. Badly. He's months behind on everything. It's a house of cards. I felt the ground truly shift beneath my feet then, a seismic tremor that shook my very core. So that's why he texted me? I whispered, the words barely audible. Not to reconcile, not to fix anything between us, just to use me. Lena hesitated, her eyes filled with unspoken meaning. There's more. The lenders are panicking. They're willing to sell the entire debt portfolio at a fraction of its true value. A slow, unfamiliar calm spread through me, a chilling certainty that settled deep in my bones. It wasn't anger. It was something far more potent. It was absolute clarity. Buy it, I said, my voice steady, unwavering. Lena blinked, a flicker of surprise in her sharp eyes. All of it. Yes, I confirmed, meeting her gaze. Every last dollar he owes. Because if my father wanted a family meeting, he was about to meet a very different version of his daughter. One he had never bothered to acknowledge, let alone see. Lena, true to her formidable reputation, didn't flinch when I instructed her to acquire the entire debt portfolio. That's precisely why she was my CFO. Her loyalty was absolute, her efficiency unparalleled. She questioned my sanity, not in the moment but only after the job was already done, the complex legal machinery set in motion. By midnight, we were surrounded by a chaotic sea of paperwork, glowing laptop screens, thick signature packets, and black coffee that tasted less like caffeine and more like burnt determination. Every single sheet of paper represented another crumbling piece of my father's once impenetrable kingdom. At 2:13 a.m., Lena looked up from her screen, her tired eyes meeting mine. Hannah, she said, her voice quiet but filled with the weight of her words. Once this is finalized, you'll own everything your father ever built. Are you truly ready for that? I inhaled slowly, steadily, taking a moment to gather my thoughts. I'm not doing this to hurt him, I replied, the truth ringing clear in the hushed office. I'm doing this because he expects me to save him, without ever truly seeing me. This is the only way he will. She simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of my complex truth. You're buying control, she affirmed. Not revenge. By sunrise, the frantic lenders, relieved to offload their toxic assets, had signed every document. By noon, my legal team confirmed the complete transfer, and by late afternoon, my father's mountain of debts, his long-held hotels, his vast tracts of land, his once sacred legacy. All of it was officially, irrevocably under my authority. I had expected a surge of triumph, perhaps an electric spark of victory, a resounding boom. Instead, I felt a profound quiet settle over me. It was the kind of quiet that descends just as a colossal storm, heavy with impending thunder and lightning, pulls back for a terrifying moment before unleashing its full, devastating force. That evening, I walked to my closet, pulling out clothes I rarely wore, reserved for moments of quiet gravitas. A fitted black dress, tailored to perfection, hugging my frame with quiet power. A sleek, structured coat that spoke of unwavering confidence. Heels that added inches to my height, making my posture straighten, naturally, with an unintentional authority I hadn't known I possessed. This wasn't about looking powerful, I realized as I caught my reflection. It was about no longer shrinking, no longer making myself small to fit into someone else's narrow expectations. Daniel watched me fasten my earrings, his eyes soft. You're nervous, he observed gently, his voice a comforting murmur. I didn't deny it. I'm not nervous about seeing him, I replied, my gaze meeting his in the mirror. I'm nervous I might still care. He stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Hannah, caring doesn't make you weak, he said, his voice imbued with a wisdom I often relied on. Letting him keep hurting you does. I exhaled shakily, a lifetime of suppressed emotion escaping with that breath. Tonight, I stated, the words firm, isn't about pleasing my father. Tonight is about facing him with the truth he has spent a lifetime pointedly ignoring. On the drive over, the city lights blurred into vibrant streaks through my windshield, a kaleidoscope of urban energy. My mind, however, drifted backward, replaying a highlight reel of all the times he had casually dismissed me. His words like sharp little pebbles, thrown without thought but leaving lasting marks. Asterisk, focus on something simpler, Hannah. Asterisk, asterisk, you're not cut out for real business. Asterisk, asterisk, this industry is too big for you. Asterisk, I used to internalize every single word, letting them chip away at my confidence, eroding my belief in myself. I used to genuinely think that if I just achieved enough success, if I just built enough, I could finally prove him wrong, shatter his dismissive assumptions. But now, with the thick folder of documents resting heavily in my bag, the contracts granting me full legal claim over his entire crumbling empire, a profound realization washed over me. I didn't need to prove anything to him. I already had. The proof was undeniably in my hands. When I pulled into the polished country club parking lot, my phone buzzed again. A text from Mom. Please be kind to your father tonight, sweetheart. He's under so much stress. My chest tightened. A familiar, unwelcome constriction. Even now, after everything, after years of his neglect and my struggles, they still expected me to shrink, to bend, to mollify, to soothe the bruised ego of the man who had never once protected mine. Not tonight. I slipped my phone into my purse, locked the car, and stood taller than I ever had before, every inch of my being radiating a quiet, unshakable power. Because tonight I wasn't the girl he had ignored. I wasn't the abandoned bride. I wasn't the daughter he had forgotten. Tonight, I was the woman who owned the very future he was about to beg for. And he, utterly oblivious, had no idea. The country club's private dining room was bathed in the warm, inviting glow of amber lights, too soft, too elegant, too comforting for the seismic confrontation that was about to unfold. I pushed open the heavy oak door, and 4 faces snapped toward me, their expressions a mix of surprise and irritation. My father, my mother, my brother Ethan, and my uncle Mark. All seated at a meticulously set table, laden with expensive wine they most certainly couldn't afford anymore. Dad, ever the patriarch, leaned back in his chair, a carefully cultivated air of corporate authority about him, like a CEO preparing to deliver a stern lecture to a subordinate. Hannah, he said, his voice cool, devoid of any genuine welcome. You're late. I closed the heavy door behind me, the soft click echoing in the hushed room. No, I replied, my voice calm, unwavering. I arrived exactly when I meant to. Mom flinched at my tone, her pearls clinking softly against her silk dress. Dad's eyebrow twitched, a subtle tell, but he held his tongue. Sit, he commanded, his eyes narrowing. We have things to discuss. I remained standing, rooted to the spot. Ethan, ever impatient, scoffed. Look, I know why I'm here. He gestured vaguely at me. Then let's skip the dramatics, I suggested, my voice cutting through the tension. Dad's business is in trouble. Big trouble. My father, regaining his composure, smoothly finished Ethan's thought. His voice still smooth, but now edged with a razor-sharp precision. And your company, Hannah, is doing exceptionally well. Your valuation proves you have the means to help your family. Asterisk help your family. Asterisk not, I'm proud of you. Not, congratulations on your incredible achievement. Just raw expectation. Undeniable entitlement. I took a deliberate step closer to the table, my eyes sweeping over their faces. So this dinner, I stated, my voice a quiet declaration, is about money. Mom clasped her hands together, her knuckles white. Hannah, sweetheart, your father is failing. Financially, operationally, completely. I interrupted, cutting her off, my voice steady. Dad's expression darkened, a stormy cloud crossing his features. We hit a rough patch, that's all. With your support, we can stabilize the properties until... You mean the properties you haven't paid contractors on for months? I interjected again, my questions like precise surgical strikes. The loans you defaulted on? The ones already scheduled for liquidation? Ethan's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine shock crossing his face. Dad stiffened, his posture rigid with contained fury. Uncle Mark cleared his throat nervously, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. Dad hissed, his voice low and dangerous. How do you know about that? I placed my handbag on an empty chair, the leather making a soft thud against the polished wood. Then, with deliberate slowness, I pulled out the thick folder Lena had prepared. Because, I said, sliding it across the gleaming table, pushing it towards him. I now own every dollar of your debt. Dad blinked, his eyes wide with disbelief, his mouth slightly agape. What did you just say? Ethan, quicker to react, snatched the folder, flipped it open, and his face drained of all color, turning a sickly pale. Dad, he whispered, his voice hoarse. This is real. She bought everything. Mom clutched her chest, a theatrical gasp escaping her lips. Oh my God, Hannah, why would you do that? Dad slammed his palms on the table, the expensive wine glasses rattling precariously. How dare you interfere in my business? I remained perfectly steady, an unyielding monolith in the storm of his rage. You summoned me here for help? I countered, my voice calm, controlled. This is help. This is control. Dad roared, a primal sound of a cornered beast. You're trying to take what's mine. I met his fury with complete, unblinking stillness. I didn't take it, I stated, my voice unwavering. You lost it. I just got there first. Ethan sprang to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You're unbelievable. Dad built everything we have. Everything you have. I corrected him, my gaze firm. I built mine on my own. Mom was openly crying now, her face streaked with tears. Hannah, please. Your father is under so much pressure. He's been working so hard. I snapped. The carefully constructed dam of my composure finally gave way, a single potent truth bursting forth. He didn't even come to my wedding. Silence, thick and suffocating, slammed into the room, a tangible force. Dad's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing. That was unfortunate timing. No, I retorted, my voice sharp, cutting through his flimsy excuse. Unfortunate timing is traffic. Missing your daughter's wedding is a choice, just like you chose to abandon me over and over again, for years. He opened his mouth to speak, to offer another flimsy justification, but I cut him off, my voice gaining strength. This isn't about family, Dad. It's about money. You ignored me for years until I became valuable, until I became useful to you. Mom whispered. That's not true. Then why? I asked quietly, my voice laced with a cold, clear logic. Did he text me only after he saw that $580 million headline? Why not when I opened my first hotel or my second? Why not at my wedding? Why now, Dad? Why now? Dad's voice cracked, not with sorrow, but with raw, frustrated anger. You owe this family. I slammed my hand on the table, the force of it making the wine glasses rattle violently, the silverware jump. I owe you nothing. They all froze, momentarily stunned into silence by the sheer force of my declaration. My voice was shaking now, but it was strong, filled with a power I hadn't known I possessed. I begged for your love for years, I recounted, the words a confession and a condemnation. I worked myself into the ground, sacrificing everything, trying to become someone you'd finally show up for. And when I finally succeeded entirely on my own, you didn't congratulate me. You summoned me. Dad's eyes narrowed, a predatory glint in their depths. So what now? He sneered. You want to humiliate us? Destroy everything I built? I reached into the folder, pulling out a single, pristine envelope. I'm giving you a path out, I said, my voice resonating with an unshakable authority. 30 days to vacate all properties. After that, my company takes full operational control. Mom began to sob openly, her pleas guttural. Please, Hannah, don't do this. Dad stared at me, his gaze devoid of fatherly sadness, replaced instead with the dawning, stunned realization that he no longer held any power over me. You're no daughter of mine, he whispered, the words laced with venom. Finally, I replied, a ghost of a smile touching my lips. The truth, spoken aloud. I straightened my posture, lifting my chin, my gaze steady, unwavering. No, I affirmed quietly, the finality of it hanging in the air. And you made sure of that years ago. Then, I picked up my purse, turned my back on all of them, on the echoes of a broken past, and walked toward the door. Behind me, chairs scraped violently. Someone, I think Ethan, shouted my name in a strangled cry. My mother wailed, a sound of profound despair, but none of it touched me. For the very first time in my life, I wasn't leaving, secretly wishing they would follow me, begging me to stay. I was leaving knowing, with absolute certainty, that they couldn't stop me. The cool night air hit me like a cleansing wave the moment I stepped outside the country club's opulent doors. It was cool, open, and exquisitely free. For a second, I simply stood there on the stone steps, my chest rising and falling in deep, uninhibited breaths, as if I had been submerged underwater for years, holding my breath and had finally gloriously surfaced. Behind the heavy doors, I could still hear the muffled cacophony of yelling, my father's furious shouts, my mother's broken sobs, Ethan's desperate attempts to salvage whatever scraps of control they believed they still possessed. But none of it reached me now. It was merely background noise, a distant echo from a life I was no longer a part of. Daniel was waiting in the car, his engine softly idling. When he saw my face, illuminated by the soft glow of the parking lot lights, he didn't ask what happened. He just reached across the console, his hand finding mine and squeezing it gently as I slid into the passenger seat. You okay? He asked softly, his voice a comforting balm. I stared out the window at the glowing waterfront lights, a shimmering ribbon of gold against the dark expanse of the bay. I thought it would hurt more, I murmured, surprised by my own words. Did it? He pressed, his thumb stroking the back of my hand. I shook my head slowly, a profound sense of liberation washing over me. It felt like walking out of a prison I didn't even realize I'd been serving a life sentence in. The next morning, sunlight flooded my kitchen, warm and gentle, a stark contrast to the harsh, unforgiving office lighting I'd grown accustomed to. The thick folder, containing every damning document from last night's showdown, sat innocently on the counter. Before, the mere sight of such a folder, filled with financial reports and legal jargon, would have filled me with dread. Now it looked like freedom bound in paper. Lena called at precisely 9 a.m. The transition is complete, she announced, her voice crisp and efficient. You're officially in control of all assets. I closed my eyes, letting that reality truly sink in. Not the ownership, not the power itself, but the undeniable finality of it all. Thank you, I whispered, the words heartfelt. She hesitated, a rare moment of vulnerability from my usually stoic CFO. Are you doing okay? Really okay, Hannah? I surprised both of us by genuinely smiling, a wide, unburdened smile that felt entirely new. I think, I replied, gazing at the sunlight dancing on my kitchen floor. I've never been better. The next few weeks were a blur of movement, of strategic planning and decisive action, but it was profoundly different from the frantic, relentless pace of my earlier years. It was lighter, steadier, fueled by purpose rather than desperation. I toured each of my father's failing properties with my team, walking through crumbling walls, outdated decor, and stained carpets. Where he had seen only ruin and decay, I saw boundless possibility. We can turn this into a wellness retreat, I told the designers, my vision clear and unshakable. Make it calm, healing, intentional. It felt deeply symbolic, transforming the literal ruins of my father's empire, built on ambition and control, into serene, nurturing spaces, places built on peace, not power. One afternoon, as I stood alone in the grand lobby of what would soon become our flagship retreat, gazing out at the vast, tranquil landscape, I caught sight of my reflection in the polished glass door. A woman stood there, poised and confident, her black blazer impeccable, her hair pulled back in a sleek, no-nonsense style. Her eyes, steady and unwavering, held no trace of fear or doubt. She was a woman who had, undeniably, outgrown the smallness she was raised in, shed the constricting skin of her past. I didn't look like the tear-streaked girl who once cried alone in a bridal suite, endlessly waiting for a father who never came. I didn't look like the daughter who had begged for love that always came with impossible conditions. I looked whole. My family didn't contact me, not once, but this time the silence didn't sting. It simply existed, like distant background noise in a city I no longer inhabited, a place from which I had long since moved on. Ethan posted vague, dramatic quotes on social media about betrayal and loyalty. My mother left 2 voicemails, tearful and accusatory, but never, not once, did she apologize. And my father? Nothing. His pride, a fortress built of ego and denial, was too loud for mere words. And yet, for the first time, their reactions, their familiar patterns of behavior, didn't pull me back into old wounds. They didn't define me. They didn't matter, because I finally understood that walking away from them wasn't abandonment. It was self-rescue. It was giving myself the one thing my father had never given me, permission to choose a life not shaped by his crushing absence, but by my powerful, undeniable presence. People often assume that success, especially financial success, heals every wound. That once your name appears on headlines, proudly displayed next to a number like $580 million, all the emptiness simply vanishes, absorbed by the glow of achievement. But that's not how healing works, and it's certainly not how love works either. The truth is, nothing fundamentally changed the day my company hit that astronomical valuation. Not really. What truly changed was the moment I walked out of that country club, leaving behind the corrosive voices that had shaped my childhood, the suffocating expectations that had crushed my confidence, the silent, ever-present shadow of neglect that had followed me into adulthood. For the first time in my life, I didn't walk away wishing things had been different, yearning for a past that could never be. I walked away accepting that they weren't different, and that acceptance, in its profound simplicity, felt utterly, gloriously liberating. A few weeks later, I visited one of the newly renovated properties, now thriving as a tranquil wellness retreat. Soft, ethereal music played gently in the lobby, sunlight filtered through warm oak paneling, casting intricate patterns on the polished floors. Guests laughed quietly over cups of herbal tea, their voices hushed and relaxed. It felt peaceful, a sanctuary, like a place meticulously built for someone who had spent far too many years holding her breath. My breath. Daniel joined me by the panoramic window, his hands slipping effortlessly into mine. A gesture of quiet comfort and enduring love. Looks like a fresh start, he observed, his voice soft. I nodded, watching the wind sway the ancient trees outside, their leaves dancing in unison. It is, I whispered, my voice filled with a newfound lightness. Not just for the business, Daniel. For me. Because I finally, truly understood something I had chased my entire life without ever fully realizing. Love that has to be earned is not love. Family that only appears when you're useful is not family. And approval that comes with conditions is not approval at all. I didn't need to fix my father. I didn't need to win him over. I didn't need him to finally see me. I needed to see myself. So, if you ask me what the real turning point was, it wasn't the valuation, incredible as it was. It wasn't the strategic acquisition of his debt. It wasn't even the dinner showdown, as cathartic as it felt. It was the quiet, profound moment I realized I wasn't broken for wanting a father who could never be one. I was simply human. And the moment I chose myself, unequivocally, over the people who had kept choosing my usefulness, I didn't lose a family. I reclaimed my life. And that, I understood with a clarity that surpassed all material wealth, was worth far more than $580 million.